All right, listeners, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Today I am joined by Anne, and though her resume has a lot of different pieces on it, she's a CPA, she's a retired pro golfer. I'm looking at her
Yes,
for sure.
yes, definitely.
Um, but what I'm so excited for today is her expertise and her heart for small business and how to navigate tough times because we've all survived one semi recently. And if we're being honest with ourselves, I think times are kind of ticking back up, maybe in a different way. And so I'm excited to dive into that. My hope is if you're a business owner, you listen to this episode and you get some takeaways that can help you, make sure that your ship is sound, as they say. So, Anne, first, before we talk business, can you walk us through your journey, your golf story, how the heck you chose accounting? Give us like the quick version of
The
how it
quick
all came to
version.
be.
Yes, so I grew up, I played golf all through high school. I played in college. I golf is one of those very unique sports when you're younger that you get to travel the country. So people don't realize, but like competitive golf is not necessarily in your town. It's literally like you're getting on a plane and you're flying to Chicago and you're going to go play for a week. So you learn a lot of great life lessons as a competitive golfer. And my parents didn't have a lot of money, so they literally would like hand me a plane ticket and be like, "All right, you're going to fly to, Oklahoma City, and when you get there, some random person's going to pick you up and they're going to take the to your house." And like, so it's really a very like unique opportunity to learn a lot about yourself along the way, and also different people who come from all these different backgrounds because you're there by yourself for 4 or 5 days. And so what I loved about golf was the journey of it, that you're out there, you're trying to get better. Really, the other unique thing about golf is nobody really cares how you do, right? They're all trying to do their best, and it's not like a team environment where it's like winner loser. It's literally just, I'm trying to get better and improve my stroke average, and I know if I do that, my ranking points will go up. So that was, my whole college in a nutshell. And then when I got to my senior year, I had really worked incredibly hard, had tried to, play in all the events, and I ended up ranked 11th in the country. And when that happened, all of a sudden I started thinking about, well, is this something you want to do as a career? You've done well amateur wise. So does that transition into professional? And yeah, so I decided when I graduated to give it a try. But what I realized quickly was like golf is not my passion. Like if I was being honest, I loved the journey and I loved meeting, because you also meet a lot of entrepreneurs play golf for whatever reason. So you meet all of these business owners, people who own the local restaurant or brewery, and all those great people. And that's what I loved. It wasn't necessarily standing around talking about my golf swing, but really learning their story. So after a year, I just realized, I could spend 10 years going down this road, or I could be honest and go try to find something that I do love. And so probably one of the hardest discussions I've ever had was with my swing coach, who's like, "Well, you can't just give pro golf 1 year." And I'm like, "Yeah, but you just feel it, right? Like either you feel it or you don't." And my heart wasn't in it. So I went and ended up kind of working at a course for a while, trying to figure out what I want to do. And one of the greatest pieces of advice I've ever gotten was from one of my accounting instructors, who also was a member at the golf course that I was working at, who saw me one day and she's like, "Well, what are you going to do next?" And I said, "I have no idea. My major is economics. You don't have a lot of job opportunities as an economics major." And she's like, "Well, try accounting. Like anyone can learn accounting. It's a skill. People think it's something you're born with, but it truly is a skill you can teach yourself. It's not that different from economics, other than there's going to be more math." And I'm like, okay. So, so she helped and kind of guided me along the accounting path. And she was 100% right. But that mindset going into accounting, I think, was so unique, because most people go to accounting and once they take a class, they're like, "Oh, it's not for me." And just knowing that she, had her PhD in accounting, was telling me it was a skill, that I'm like, all right, well, clearly maybe I'm not working hard enough, or I'm not, learning it the best, and just approaching it where it wasn't something that I was bad at. It was just something I needed to get better at. And so when I got out into the real world, became a CPA, I just think that lesson stayed with me, forever.
Yeah, total. And then you eventually went off and started your own firm.
Yes. So what I
Yeah.
realized when I got to the big firms was that my background was not the average accountant either. But like, here I was with all these people who'd done internships and they'd been like dreaming of the day they were in like an accounting firm. And I'm like, Yeah, like I was playing golf up to like a year and a half ago, but I've sort of adapted and I like accounting, but it wasn't something I ever thought I'd be doing forever. And what I realized is that I was so much better at relating to our clients than everyone else in my firm because I had spent all this time with these business owners and I understood their hatred for accounting and I understood that they were scared by it. And most accountants had grown up in a world of other accountants. And so that was the language they knew. And it's sort of like lawyers that you're going to talk this complex talk and make it sound really hard. And I knew from all the time spent with these entrepreneurs that like that's not what they want, right? Like they just want to understand, they want to be educated, but they're incredibly smart people. And I think a lot of times in the accounting world, you don't understand the people that struggle with accounting and the business owners don't understand the people that love accounting. And so there's like inherently this just disconnect that doesn't work. But I had the unique opportunity of knowing both sides and realizing that like the entrepreneur is incredibly smart. They just don't want to learn accounting. And the accountant is incredibly smart. They don't want to learn business either. So, we have to find a way to coexist. And that, when I realized was that the big firms, you're never going to be able to do that, right? Like you have a model that sort of really doesn't work for the business owner in that it's, billable hours and the whole goal is to spend the least amount of time possible but get the return done. And if you really want to help business owners, which is what I wanted to do, you're never going to be able to do it that way. And so after a few years I just decided to go out on my own and really was driven by I want to blow up the way accounting works with business owners. Like I want to find a way to where it is a good relationship, it benefits both sides, and we're able to come up with a better outcome as a result.
I think that's really important to think about. And I think a lot of people just avoid it, especially if you're like a micro business or a one woman show. I think a lot of people literally just have like the horse blinders up and they just,
Yes,
yeah,
yes, I
yeah,
know.
especially the last couple of years. So let's get to restaurants. How did you walk down the path of realizing that was really the best people for you to serve?
So again, kind of drawing on my golf background, I'd been a lot around a lot of restaurants. I'd worked in restaurants. My off time, because it was the easiest way to make the most money in the shortest amount of time, was work a Friday, Saturday night at a restaurant and get tips. And so I always really understood restaurants and hospitality and, understanding what they were trying to do. And when I went out into accounting, it was amazing how many people don't understand because I think unless you've worked in a restaurant, you don't really understand like all the ins and outs or how complicated it is. And what's so funny, and even now, it's like I try to tell my clients, I'm like, you know so much more than you give yourself credit for. Because if you can understand how a restaurant operates and the 7 ways someone can pay you and the 5 different ways you pay your employees and like all of the ins and outs, you can understand anything. Like you really don't realize how much you know. Even a chef, it's like they might hate accounting, but they can do a recipe card. I'm like, if you could do a recipe card with all of that math, like you can do accounting is adding and subtracting. It's not that hard. So I do think that, restaurants are inherently very complex and it's so easy to get it wrong in the accounting world, where you really don't know how much money they've made because of all of these ins and outs. So I found that there was incredible need, but also just, bridging that education gap to kind of help them better understand their accounting also felt like, a great way to help an industry that's sort of underserved in the accounting world.
For sure. And then let's walk right into it, which is COVID. How now the last couple of years have gone by. What, in reflection, what do you feel like worked for the restaurants that were able to survive? Maybe what was not working for ones that weren't able to stay open? What kind of lessons could we share with people listening right now?
I think there are a ton of restaurants. I mean, I think, our relationship with restaurants was unique in that our model is we're flat fee and we bill monthly. So when COVID hit, we were as impacted as anyone and as at risk as anyone, which most accounting firms were, right? Like they were still kind of going through tax season and, plugging along, but we were very exposed just being so close to the hospitality industry. And I think it really hit home for me. I was a daughter of an entrepreneur and my dad's business failed when I was a kid. And I remember how horrible that was for him for like 2 years. And when COVID happened, all of a sudden, every one of my clients has a failing business. They have zero sales coming in the door and they know that they have zero sales coming in the door. And it hit me in a very real way where, right away we decided we're going to do everything we can to help this industry, if it's free webinars, if it's calls. And so right away we started a Zoom call once a week, noon. And it was so bizarre because anyone who knows hospitality, it's like the hardest thing to do is get like a restaurant owner, get their attention. And they're just like sitting by the clock, like waiting for the 12 o'clock Zoom call. You're like, this is bizarre. Like these guys in a normal world would not be available at 12 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. And here they are sitting at home, like they freaking out. They don't know what to do. And people don't realize like how scary that was for most of them, because you truly didn't know when people were going to be able to come in the door again. Or before COVID, most independent restaurants especially weren't familiar with the delivery platforms. Like the chains maybe were, but independents hadn't, they didn't know what Uber Eats was, or maybe they played around with it, but now that was their lifeline. And so, you know, what you saw right away was, once the panic subsided, that, people really had to find a way to see the forest through the trees. Right? They had to be able to sit back and say, how are we going to get through this? And like, what are our options? So, what was crazy about the first conversations was just trying to come to grips with the emotion of it. Usually people who had, they've had Friday, Saturday night full dining rooms for 20 years, right? And all of a sudden, dining rooms closed. You're trying to serve steak to go. I mean, I had calls with like hibachi places. Like, no one's going to order hibachi to go. Like, some just didn't work. And what was crazy about that time was how, I mean, first, I think the business owners that were able to really draw a line in the sand and say, this is my business. Like, I want to continue. Right? I love what I do. This will pass, but I need to, put myself first and make sure I make the best decisions for my business. Those are the ones that were able to, I think, carve a path forward. Because even when the government assistance comes, like looking back now, it's like, oh yeah, it's sort of a blur, but people don't realize they had 5 weeks before they ever got any money from the government. So you've shut someone down, like the hibachi place, right? There's no one coming in, there's no one ordering takeout. They had to first make it 5 weeks on their own, which most restaurants are lucky if they have 2 weeks cash reserves. So just to get to 5 weeks was incredible. Then there was so much misinformation, right? Like they might have been able to get the first PPP loan, but nobody knew what that was, right? Like all of a sudden you have, hundreds of thousands of dollars deposited in your bank account, which is terrifying because you're like, I don't know what I just signed up for, but I need the cash. So I'll do whatever it takes. And then it was, am I supposed to spend it in 8 weeks? Am I going to get in trouble if I don't? It's a loan versus I want it forgiven. I mean, just to think through that when you're in this panic, I commend each and every one of them. And I think the ones that were able to really sit back and say, if it's a loan, it's a loan. I don't care. I'm going to make the decision that's best for my business, which is I'm going to look at my employees. I'm going to try to keep the ones I can. I'm not going to be unrealistic. I mean, sadly, there were people who spent it in 8 weeks following the rules and then had no cash because COVID was longer than 8 weeks. Like it was a crazy time. But I think, what you saw there were the ones that were able to have that inner belief in like, I believe in my brand. I know that our community loves us. I know we're going to find a path forward. Those are the ones that were able to make the best decisions. But what I realized was it's so mental. Where
Mm.
before COVID, I had always just thought, well, you're a restaurant owner, you're a business owner, like, it's different than that sports psychology stuff. And, what you realize during COVID is it's very much the same because the ones that were walking in every day sad or couldn't get through the emotion or the anger, it their team felt it. They made worse decisions than the ones that were like, all right, here we go. We're gonna make hand sanitizer. And like, it had this positive mindset, whether they believed it or not, the ones that were showing up and like motivating their team, they saw better results and all of a sudden, could see a better outcome. So it was a fascinating time, but I think, one that resonated to us as a company to just see, how can we get people to change the way they think about their business? Because there's always going to be struggle. I mean, hopefully not like that, but that mental side is very important. And if we can get rid of the frustration and the anger and the feeling that you made a mistake and all of that, and really help you make better decisions every day, like you really will have a better outcome.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting there is the difference, as you pointed out. I mean, I'm sure you had prior to COVID, super successful restaurant, another super successful restaurant. You probably would have assumed both would have made it. And the
Yeah.
fact that the variables were the same, because this, happened in varying capacities across the world, it really does show the mental piece of it. What do you think, like, where are they drawing this positivity? Like, I don't know, just watching these people, what do you think is working for them? How are they finding that positivity amongst the chaos?
Yeah, I mean, I think in some respects, it's a confidence in themselves. I
Mm,
think the ones that, because I think the other hard part about being any entrepreneur or a business owner, but especially in hospitality, there's a lot of not not valuing your own worth, right? Like you see this, it's a really common thing in restaurants, especially, but I'm sure in any business where it's like you're the one that gets paid last. But I think what people don't realize with that is that hurts your confidence, right? You're the one, you're sacrificing for the team, or you're not going to get paid this week, but your team will, so it's okay. But people don't realize the mental side of that is you're undervaluing you. And I think one common trait that I saw, especially in COVID, is the people who had confidence in, like, you know what, I am a leader of this business. I have done this over the last 20 years. And you know what? I was able to get through '08 and I was fine. And I got through 2000 and I was fine. So I'm gonna be fine. And those are the ones that like believed in their role as a leader. And I think, it was a huge eye opener to the ones that just always kind of like being friends with the team. I don't want to be the one out in front. Like those I think were the ones that struggled more than the people who saw, you know what, my team needs a leader. I'm going to be a leader. I'm not going to be perfect. I'm going to forgive myself when I'm not perfect, but every day I'm going to show up, and this role is as important as any other role on the team.
ugh, good advice. Any business owner should write that one down because it's absolutely true. Even again, even if you're a one person show, small team, you're still someone has to steer the ship. Someone has to decide where it's going.
Yeah, it's so important, especially during turbulent times, right? Because I
Yeah.
think people are like, and I think that was the other struggle of COVID is, sadly, because you had to let your entire team go if you had a restaurant, the hibachi place, right? You
Yeah.
can't have a team because you have no hibachi. But, even though your role right now might be taking out the trash and it wasn't before, or cleaning the bathroom it wasn't before, you're still the leader who's deciding to do those things, right? And I think it's important to, no matter what you're doing in your business, you're still the leader.
Yeah, for sure. So what has changed maybe in how people are running a business moving forward? What advice are you giving to people or what do you like mindset wise and just system wide for business?
So I think the biggest thing with COVID was the awareness of cash flow,
Mm,
to really be, what I think is interesting about this time now with inflation and COVID, and that's what I try to draw on with some of our clients is, during COVID, the silver lining was people had to make hard decisions, but they weren't afraid to make hard decisions, right? So like one of our clients had like a fine dining restaurant in downtown Philly. Well, pre-COVID, he was, very proud of his menu, and it was a great menu. And it was like all this high-end food and the New York, kind of a New York inspired menu here in Philly. And the biggest frustration was a lot of people didn't really appreciate his high-end menu. They really want it. And, so all of these, discussions he'd had for months about like how great his menu was. The minute COVID hit, he's like, you know what? Whatever. If they want pretzels and chicken fingers, I'm going to give them pretzels and chicken fingers. They're like, all of a sudden, what he'd been fighting for months, which was, the area around him was mostly like younger people in college and they just wanted to go out and drink, all of a sudden it's like, fine, if that's what they want, fine. And you know what? I'm going to go on Uber Eats and I'll, fine, because I have to. And I think you had a lot of that. You had people who were like, whatever I need to do to get this dollar amount in the door is what I'm going to do because I don't want to fail. And what I challenge our clients with now, and again, this is not an easy thing, is like, is that different from now where you might have a customer who doesn't want to pay $15 for a burger? Like if you approach it the same way where it's like, fine, I'm going to find something they like. I'm going to make sure they come to me because I need X amount of dollars to make my business work. How different is that from, I'm going to have a special on the menu that's $10. I'm not saying give it away, make sure the margin is there, versus telling the customer, if you can't afford a $15 burger, you're not my customer, right? Like that is the mindset that will hurt in this environment. And I think just like COVID, if we meet our customers where they are, whether it's they're scared to sit in the dining room or they truly are struggling with inflation, that's how our brand will survive a turbulent time.
Yeah, for sure. Let's unpack that a bit. So, for the business owner listening, how would you, sorry to corner you, how would you describe what's happening right now?
I mean, I think what people don't realize outside of small business, and I would say the same as COVID, because I was so like pissed off for the first year of COVID that like
Yeah.
the people who are at home with like corporate desk jobs have no idea what's going on in the entrepreneur world. The same is true here, right? Like to the normal consumer, you see it at the pump and you see it in the grocery store and you see it when you buy things. Yes, you definitely see inflation. To a business owner, you have two things because you have a customer who's becoming increasingly more price conscious, and it's truly costing you significantly more to operate. I think in hospitality, I've done the numbers and run it as your labor has probably gone up 30 to 40%, right? Your busboy through 2 years ago was paid $10 an hour. That was a good rate. Right now, there's places where people are paying $20 for a busboy, depending on urban environments. I mean, that's 50% more. So it's not like your customer is going to pay 50% more for your burger. Like they probably aren't. And so you have it on both sides, but that's where I think you have to be open to reinventing the wheel, whether it's a different labor source, it's a different labor structure, or it's a different product, right? Like maybe you can't sell all $15 burgers. Maybe we have to find things that people will buy on our menu that have a better margin that will help offset the labor. Seeing people talk about gratuity charges or, something with the tips, like whatever it is, it's not like the next generation is going to go home and cook, right? They're not like people inherently want to go out to eat. They want the experience of it. They want to enjoy it. So on the one hand, you have a customer that wants to come. We just have to find a way to reinvent the model. And the model is broken. And I don't know that it's going to go back with the inflation anytime soon. So we just have to figure it out.
Yeah. So, what you're saying is everything's more expensive. You still run a business, but you also have to pay your own bills too. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think you have to be open to the fact that it might not work the way it was before, right? Like you
Mm,
have to find a way of like your labor and your cost of goods may not work right now. So what can we do differently? Whether it's, different product offering to increase sales, increase volume so our fixed costs are less, our labor, like whatever it is, everything is on the table. And I think
yeah.
that's where I go. It's so similar to COVID, where for that 1 month, everybody was open to whatever it was. I mean, I had people who've had like a 20-year, like huge operation rolling out hot dog carts, right? I mean, they were open to anything. And if we could go approach this problem with that mindset, I think you'd be amazed at what you're going to come up with versus just the fight of like being mad that we have to spend more than we did 2 years ago.
How long do you think we're going to be in this season? You may not know the answer.
I mean, sadly, I don't know. That's where I go back to COVID. I don't know
Yeah.
that it's going to go back. I mean,
Yeah.
especially with restaurants, every position has gone up by $5, let's say. So if you multiply that by your hours that it might take 400 hours to run your restaurant. I mean, that's a huge dollar amount that I don't know that it's going to go back. And I don't know that your customer is going to pay what it would take to make the model work the old way, which is where I think you're either going to solve it by technology, being creative with your management team. Maybe it's different expectations. Maybe your GM is working some of the time, or your assistant manager is working some of the time. But we have to come up with a creative solution because I think just sitting back and saying, oh, when it goes back, because food costs might go back, right? That fluctuates, but the labor is not going to go back.
Yeah. 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 What, aside from just the dollar amount, do you feel like the labor market has changed too? Like finding good employees, people's willingness to work? Do you see that having an impact on your clients?
Definitely. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's the other hard part where, you don't ever want to look back and be mad or, feel like the hospitality industry was the victim of COVID, because you had
Right.
to do what you had to do, and it would have been bad had people stayed open and all gotten sick too. So it's not like that. But I definitely think with the other part that people don't realize is overnight, the restaurant had to fire their employees because they had to wait 5 weeks to get the money from the government. And even when they got it, some weren't open, especially California, New York, like they weren't open for a year. So in that time, you also lost your experience gap, right? Like all of your experienced employees had to go find other work. They couldn't sit around and wait for the restaurant to open. So in that timeline, the owner probably had a team of your long term, like your favorite restaurant spot in your town, probably had like its, group of employees that had been with them forever. Well, they're gone.
Yeah.
And so now you have new employees coming in and they get frustrated because they don't know how to do things. You have an owner who maybe was an owner for 20 years and didn't have to train anyone because his group of employees trained everyone. And now he doesn't know how to do things or she doesn't know how to do. I mean, you've just such a knowledge gap missing. And so inherently, I think it's created a very frustrating situation for employees, a frustrating situation for managers. And again, I think to solve that problem, you really have to blow it up and say every role, what is it that this role should be and how do I make it work for my employee, understanding generation things that my new employees want things differently. And I think the businesses that are able to just look at it as it's a different world, and that's okay, because it doesn't mean we're not going to find a great team again. But we can't sit back and wait for our team to return to what it was in 19, because that's not going to happen.
Ugh, I know, it's so hard to hear. I can feel people listening and being like, really? But I agree. It's like, paving the way in an opportunity to reestablish what we want that to look like, both from cost and getting the right people on the bus, and also what customers you serve. Maybe that's changed and evolved too.
Yes, and I think the other piece of it is technology has come a
Mm,
long way
yeah.
during COVID, and I think that's okay. Like we can, I was talking to one guy, and it's like, he knows he's short staffed, and it's like seasonal, and you're so busy, and so one of the ideas was like, what about like an app on your phone where people could pay from the table, right? Or one of the kiosks, people can pay from the table. Oh, my customers will never like that. And I'm like, I don't know, because I think they will now. Like 2 years
Yeah.
ago, probably no, or
Yeah.
2019, they would have thought you were crazy. Now, if the option is you're going to wait 10 minutes to pay your bill, or I can pay it on my phone, probably going to be fine paying it on my phone, and I'm not going to be that upset about it. So, being open to technology, I think is important too.
Yeah, for sure. So what other advice would you give business owners? This episode, when people are listening in real time, will be end of 2022. So advice you would give to someone listening. It could be anything.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's just, really use this time to look at everything about your business, right? Like whatever has happened over the past year, good, bad, it's not really necessarily like any mistakes that you made. I think it's so easy to look backwards. Like a lot of our clients now with all the government money, like, oh, if I had known, like I would have spent it differently, or I would have saved it. And you can't really go back and judge yourself during that time because you have gone through the hardest thing, arguably, of any business owner ever, in the last 2 years. So that's okay. But I think now is the time to not just look at where your business is, but really where do you want to go? Because I think the other part is we've gotten so caught up in this thought of like, well, now it's just not a good time. Like until I know now it's not, I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna do anything until I know that we get out of this. And I think at the end of the day, we have one life to live. And as business owners, we can't stop moving forward. And if you look at, some of the most turbulent times in history have also created some of the best known companies that we know today. So there's no reason that no matter what's going on around us, we can't continue towards our goals. So I think as hard as it is, and what's crazy is I would have thought as further along we get outside of COVID, it would finally be a good time to budget for next year. That I think people are even more afraid. It's like, why would I even do that? Like I'm not, there's so much I'm dealing with. I can't even look ahead. And yet I think those are the times that we have to, right? We have to look forward and make sure that our business is moving towards our goal.
It's happening. I mean, we're moving regardless, so you might as well know if you're on track to where you want to go or not. If you just pretend it's not happening, you're naive because we really are moving in a direction,
In a direction,
right?
right?
Yeah,
Yes, we're going somewhere. So,
for sure.
and you're gonna feel better if you take the reins again and put it on paper to where you want to go next year than you are just sitting back and being worried about it.
What are some simple numbers or things to track that kind of show the health of the business and if it's going in that positive direction?
So the best one I like, I think first of all, I think one of the other lessons of COVID that, we have tried to teach our clients is that at the end of the day, you, the owner, have to know your numbers, right? And it's
Yeah.
not just like know your P&L or like you literally have to know how your business is doing every day. So as a business owner, you have to find a way to get that information. And what one of the easiest ways to do it is not just sit back and wait for, I have some clients who's like, oh, I have to wait for my accountant or wait for my bookkeeper or wait, like what we learned in COVID is we can't, right? Like if it's Sunday night and everything's shutting down Monday, you have to know where your business is, what your cash is. And I think, the easiest way for a business owner to do that is to really make sure they know their cash flow. And the quickest way to do that is as simple as it sounds, record your bank balance every day. Because all of the reasons, and sometimes it's fear, and we don't want to know our business is losing money and all of that. If we're honest, if our business is what it should be, we should see that in our cash flow every day. And yes, there's always going to be reasons why it's not, but we also need to be honest about those reasons. And if we do that for 30 days, I would challenge you to see, do you have more cash than you had 30 days ago? And if you don't, at least it should be, well, I paid down a credit card or I, bought a piece of equipment or whatever it is. There's always going to be justifications, but that's a truest test to see what does our business really bring us every month. And I think with that as a motivation, you're able to make better decisions because then it's not just some arbitrary thing on your Amex, right? It all ties back to that cash flow. And I think it can help you regain control of your business.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think, again, even just applying for the government funding. So before coaching, I had a hair salon and I was able to get some government funding, but so many of my colleagues hadn't even done their taxes yet, or maybe weren't doing them properly and they missed out on that money. And so please, if you're someone who doesn't know the financial truth of what's going on, step one, look at it in the face, even if it sucks, even if it doesn't feel good. Like, please, from past experience and just seeing so many businesses suffer, do it.
Yeah. And that's the other
Yeah.
piece. I think, so many people get so scared
Yeah.
of taxes. Like I was talking to one guy the other day and it was like, well, I don't know if I want to put myself on salary. And it's like you look at again those lessons of COVID and the owners that were on salary that were paying themselves on the up and up. Those are the ones that were able to get assistance. And same is true for your employees. Like you are not doing them favors by not, and it's not to say that it's fun, but in the long term, your business will be better if you have proof that of the money you've earned because you're not doing yourself any favors if it's all under the table. Because what happens when you go to sell it? How do you tell someone, oh, well, like my tax return, you don't really look at that. Like that's the only thing they have to look at. They're not going to believe you. And so you have like, and that I think is the businesses that are able to have, the best return on their own investment and their own time, they do it the right way and just follow the rules because they know that those rules will work for them. Like you said, during COVID, so many people couldn't get a PPP loan because they didn't have employees on payroll.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Or didn't want to look through their numbers enough to figure it out because there's too much shame, fear, emotion wrapped up in the heat of the moment. And it's like missed opportunity. I mean, the PPP stuff was also chaotic, but missed opportunity too.
Well, yeah, and I think the one of the again, one of the silver linings of COVID was the people who were able to get PPP and the owners that were finally able to go on payroll, who
Yeah.
hadn't put themselves on payroll before, and now they could. And to me, it's like you should be doing that every day. Like you should be on payroll every week. Like there's no reason. And now it's like, sadly, with inflation, like, oh, I took myself off payroll again. I'm like, why? Like your business model has to be able to sustain you getting paid. Now, again, nothing crazy, not going to go out and buy a jet, but like you should value your time. And I think the best business owners out there, them getting paid is a non-negotiable, right? Like they find a way to get paid and make sure their business is sustainable, because it will force you to make better decisions than if it's just like, oh, I won't get paid and then I don't have to worry about cutting the costs I should have cut, or, any of that.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. With all of that, where can people get more support from you? What resources do you have for people? Give us all of the notes, everyone. Get your pens ready.
Okay. Yeah, so check out our website, thelargogroup.com. We offer free resources. We do webinars once a month. Our goal is really to help educate business owners. So it doesn't have to be restaurants. A lot of what we do is restaurant, but our tools are universal. So, check out our website. If you subscribe, you'll get, free updates. But, I really think that you as the business owner, need to take control in this area. And so our goal is to help you in that.
Yeah, that's awesome. We'll have all of that linked in the show notes. And is there anything else that the people need to know, advice you want to give, any just last minute thoughts you want to share?
Yeah, so I think that, the other piece of advice that I think you learn along the way is just that it's a journey, right? Like you
Yeah.
you as a business owner are getting better every day. So don't be too hard on yourself for the past. But I think if we're learning and we're evolving and we're learning from our business model and making it better, you'll be able to survive any challenge and really keep heading towards your goal.
Yeah. Well, and as you said earlier, stuff's always going to come up, and you have the ability to decide how you will mentally handle it and navigate through that. And now is the time to get house in order.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you, Anne, for your time. The went by so fast. I just really appreciate your wisdom. And audience, please go check her out, get all of her resources too, and don't let this, all the mental stuff that's tied to finances and accounting specifically, hold you back from preparing for whatever you need to.
Yes. Well, thank you. This was great.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. We'll catch you next week.